Let's just dive right into this explainer, covering the architecture and true capabilities of n8n. Look, if you've spent any time building automations, you know the exact friction I'm talking about. You hit a wall where a standard visual builder just flat out refuses to support the complex logic your business actually needs. Well, today, we're popping the hood on a source-available workflow automation platform that was purpose-built to solve exactly that problem.
We're going to break this down across 5 critical areas: the node-based editor, triggers, data transformation, local AI agent integration, and finally, deployment. Now, just to establish the sheer scale of adoption right out of the gate, check out this number, 196,843. That is the exact number of GitHub stars n8n has at the time of this analysis. It places it squarely among the absolute most popular projects for technical teams. We're talking DevOps, SecOps, and IT, basically anyone who desperately needs to integrate tools without being locked into some rigid, inflexible platform. All right, let's kick things off with Section 1, the node-based editor, which is really the absolute foundation of n8n. This brilliantly illustrates the platform's core philosophy. With standard automation tools, you're usually forced into a binary choice, right? You either get a highly visual building experience that has strict, annoying limitations, or you're stuck writing raw code completely from scratch. But n8n flips that script. It lets you write JavaScript or Python literally anywhere in your workflow. If a pre-built node doesn't do exactly what you need it to, you just drop in a custom code node. You get all the structure of a visual canvas, but zero restrictions on your underlying logic. It's a total game changer. Moving right along to Section 2, let's look at triggers and workflow logic, the actual engine of your automation.
Every workflow in n8n kicks off with a trigger, and you'll generally see 3 main types here. First up, we've got external webhooks. These are awesome for instantly capturing data from outside events, like a form submission or a custom API call. Next, we have scheduled triggers, which execute your workflows at specific time intervals. Think of it exactly like a cron job. And finally, application-specific triggers. These fire off when something happens in a third-party app, like a new row getting added to your database.
Now, here is a massive architectural advantage that n8n gives you. You are absolutely not limited to a single input. You can have multiple triggers inside a single workflow. So, instead of building 5 different automations for 5 different ad platforms, you can consolidate all those entry points and your webhooks into one beautifully streamlined process. This drastically cuts down on redundancy and makes maintaining your systems infinitely easier.
And when you're ready to scale, without building those massive, unmanageable monolithic automations, n8n brings in the execute workflow node. This little powerhouse allows you to break your massive automations down into modular, reusable sub-workflows, and you just pass JSON payloads between them. So, as an example, you could build one dedicated sub-workflow just for data enrichment. Then, any of your main workflows can simply call that sub-workflow, pass it the data, and just wait for the nicely formatted result to come back.
That actually brings us perfectly to Section 3, data transformation with expressions, or as we like to call it, the transformer.
Before you can transform data, you really have to know what you're working with. APIs love to return all sorts of different formats, so understanding these foundational data structures is crucial, especially arrays and nested JSON objects. n8n natively handles the standard types perfectly: strings, numbers, booleans, arrays, and objects. In a real-world scenario, you are going to frequently encounter these deeply nested JSON arrays that require some very specific targeting to extract the exact value you're looking for.
To pull off that extraction, n8n uses a custom JSON variable to access the incoming data. The syntax looks like this: opening brackets, $JSON.body.city, closing brackets. This specific expression jumps into the incoming JSON payload and elegantly isolates the value of city. It uses James path syntax under the hood, making it incredibly precise. You can query and extract exactly what you need, honestly, no matter how complex the nesting gets.
But let's be real, data rarely arrives in the exact format we want it to. So, going beyond just simple extraction, you can actually use built-in JavaScript functions directly inside these expressions to dynamically transform your text. Take a look at this snippet. It shows how you can take an incoming variable, in this case name, and literally just append .to uppercase to it. That automatically standardizes the capitalization before passing it on to your database, and it completely eliminates the need to build a separate, bulky code block just to format text.
All right, let's shift gears to Section 4, local AI agents via Llama. This acts as the brain of the operation, and it is easily one of the most compelling features for technical teams right now.
Running large language models locally is absolutely critical for any company handling sensitive data. Setting up a local AI with n8n involves 3 straightforward steps. First, you run a llama on your local machine to host a model, like Llama 3 for instance. Second, you just drop a chat trigger node into n8n to serve as your interface. And third, and this is a big one for you Docker users out there, you have to configure your network so n8n can actually communicate with your local host. You do that by ensuring n8n starts with a -- network equals host parameter. That lets it hit Llama's API smoothly on port 11434. Under the hood, n8n is using LangChain to simplify all these complex interactions, and the setup just requires an Llama model subnode to bridge the connection. Why does this matter? Well, it's incredibly valuable for technical teams because it hands you 100% control over data privacy. Since all the AI processing happens completely offline, zero customer data is ever sent to external APIs. No leaks, no worries. Plus, it natively supports advanced architectures, meaning you can build complex multi-agent setups in RAG, retrieval augmented generation systems, all entirely secured within your own network.
And finally, we've arrived at Section 5, deployment and infrastructure, or how we actually scale this system.
Because building a great automation is really only half the battle, right? The other half is making sure it scales reliably.
n8n offers a bunch of self-hosting methods to perfectly fit whatever infrastructure you're running. Now, sure, you can use npm for local development and testing, but for actual production, technical teams rely heavily on Docker or Kubernetes. Containerization gives you those isolated, secure, and highly consistent deployment environments that enterprises absolutely require. Whether you want to deploy to AWS, Google Cloud, Azure, or even your own bare metal servers, these methods have you covered.
Actually deploying it can be remarkably straightforward. Check this out. This single Docker command spins up the entire environment and exposes the necessary port, 5678. But quick word of caution. In a true production setting, you definitely wouldn't just run this all by itself. You absolutely must configure persistent storage volumes. If you don't, the second that container restarts, all your workflow data and credentials are gone. So keep that in mind.
Now, when you start scaling up to thousands of executions, performance optimization isn't just nice to have, it's critical. To avoid hitting bottlenecks, you need a few specific strategies. First, you've got to enable parallel processing, so you're splitting items into branches rather than forcing them to process sequentially. Second, ensure any connected databases are using indexed fields to drastically speed up those queries. And crucially, you should be caching frequent API responses using a system like Redis, rather than aggressively hammering an external API for every single execution.
Which brings us to an often overlooked best practice. Look, if a node fails, n8n's default behavior is to stop the execution and mark it as an error. If you aren't actively monitoring it, that is a silent failure. To prevent that nightmare in scaled systems, n8n provides the error trigger node. This is a specialized node that just listens for unhandled errors across your entire instance and instantly routes them to a dedicated workflow. You can set this up so the moment an API fails, it automatically pings your Slack channel, creates an IT ticket, or even kicks off a retry sequence. It's an absolute lifesaver. The true power of n8n really lies in this hybrid approach. It gives you the rapid speed of a visual builder, the surgical precision of raw JavaScript, and total uncompromised control over your deployment and local AI infrastructure. It effectively removes all those frustrating guardrails that traditional automation tools try to force on you, which really just leaves us with one question. What complex private systems are you going to build?